What's on the menu this Thanksgiving Eve? It is MTEs all over the place. We're going to look at Maui. We're going to talk about Battle4Atlantis. Oh boy, let's eat.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college hoops show out there. I'm one of your co-hosts, Isaac Schade, and it is great to be together today. Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs, which helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Again, that's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. It's great to be joined for the first time on Locked On College Basketball by Mr. Riley Davis, who has his hand in a variety of national college basketball pots, including helping write the massive almanac put together by a whole host of people. And so Riley is affiliated with Field of 68 and Heat Check and all of these great things that Riley's doing. And so, brother, it's great to have you on. And man, it is feast week. It's Thanksgiving week. I'm rocking my Team USA beanie in honor of the fact that all we can do is tie Wales in the World Cup, but whatever. Hopefully we'll do better against England, my home country, on Thanksgiving or Friday. I can't remember when that is, but we want to look at these MTEs. And so we want to start with the main event, which was out in Vegas over the weekend. And for the 4-team MTEs, for my money, Riley, this was the best event. So great. And so my question to start this off, how many of the 4 teams from the main event are we going to see in March in the second week of the NCAA tournament?
Yeah, well, first off, thanks for having me on again, Isaac. For the listeners, I've been on the Locked On Tar Heels show before. That's how Isaac and I first connected. But first time on Locked On College Basketball. Glad to be here and talk a little bit of hoops, a little bit of Feast Week, one of the best weeks of the year. But yeah, going to your original question about how many of those teams will we see in the second weekend, I'm going to go with all 4. I think the big one is Illinois sort of exercises some of those first weekend demons that they've experienced, that the Big Ten has experienced. But I love how versatile this Illinois team is. I know that they lost to Virginia in the final, but I think when you have someone like Coleman Hawkins who can swing between the 4 and the 5, give you a little bit of switchability, but then you can also lean on a guy like Dane Danger, who's quickly becoming one of my favorite players to watch in the country. I just like a lot of what this Illinois team can do. And I mean, their freshmen have been so impressive, and it hasn't just been Sky Clark, who's the most highly touted coming in. Right. I thought Epps had a tremendous game.
Yeah, my word.
Really a good weekend. It just seemed like every other play, either since you had Sincere Harris, who was making defensive plays and bringing fantastic energy off the bench, or it was like Epps was just draining these big threes.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Illinois coming into this thing, obviously of the 4 was the lowest ranked. And I guess we should name them. We haven't enumerated all these teams. We had Baylor, UCLA, Virginia, and Illinois. And it was funny because we got the championship game is what most people assumed would have been the consolation game. Mm-hmm. But boy, both of these matchups were so high level. What a week for the Virginia Cavaliers, coming off of the shooting that happened the prior Sunday. And then you just have this domination that they have of this Continental Tire Main Event in Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. Got to brand everything these days. That's where the dollars are coming from. But what, Riley, this run that that Virginia went on to end that championship game, it was 13-0 run at one point. I think it finished at 14-3 run. What can that say about Virginia? This team we know as a defensive-minded team, but then to go on that kind of offensive run to close this out. What are you seeing in the Cavs?
Yeah, with Virginia, I think it reminded me of that meme of the guy who goes, "I guess I got my swagger back." And I was just thinking of Tony Bennett, where, you think about 3 years ago, fresh off the national title, it's like, all right, Tony Bennett is the best coach in the sport, best coach you want to build a team around. But I feel like college basketball can, as sports in general, can become a very much a what have you done for me lately team, where people have forgotten that Bennett really is this awesome coach. And, I think like the defense was good throughout this past weekend. I want to say it held Illinois under a point per possession in that championship game. At one point, I want to say late into the second half, Illinois was scoring like 0.7 points per possession and really struggling against Virginia. But honestly, I left a lot more impressed with their offense and just seeing the strides they made on that end, where you have some like Jaden Gardner who gives them that sort of interior toughness, who can score around the basket. I thought Reese Beekman obviously had
a great weekend.
Yeah, Reese Beekman, and Armand Franklin was awesome against Baylor. I mean, he looked like he looked better than he ever looked at Indiana. And I know that was one of their big questions heading into the season was, could they get Armand Franklin to be that? I want to say he's like a 37% 3-point shooter at Indiana, and would they be able to get that version as opposed to the one who shot 29% from three last year? And it looks like he's stepping up and kind of having that bounce back. And I mean, even Kihei Clark, like he's been someone who, I don't know, I thought has been pretty average since that huge play he made against Purdue way back in 2019.
Before fire, when Kihei Clark was a freshman at Virginia. Yes.
Like pre-pandemic times when we had no idea like what COVID was, what masks were, like any of that. That really puts into perspective how long he's been there. But I thought he looked really good as well. He started out super hot in that championship game, like maybe made his first 3 or 4 shots or something. And yeah, he's someone who I thought he had like bumped his head on his ceiling, and was not going to get any better. And
on his 5'10" ceiling.
Right.
Absolutely. And listen, if Virginia can continue to look like this on both sides of the ball, they will absolutely contend with North Carolina and Duke atop what's going to be a weird ACC all season long. And so we will definitely keep tabs on that. We haven't even really talked about Baylor and UCLA. I mean, that Baylor backcourt is just absolutely insane. UCLA, to me, if there's one of these 4 teams that doesn't make the second weekend, I could see it being UCLA. If Tiger Campbell is having to be more of a scorer than a facilitator, I mean, it's clear that you've got Jaime Jaquez, but what are you seeing out of UCLA so far, Riley?
Yeah, it seems like they just need someone else to be a secondary scorer besides Jaquez. I mean, you hit on that with Tiger Campbell. He's best as a facilitator who's going to come in, he's going to control the pace, limit the mistakes, make sure everybody's happy. But I mean, they desperately need some production out of Amari Bailey and Adem Bona.
100%.
And I know Bailey, I think he'll be able to get there eventually. If I was a UCLA fan, I would be a little bit concerned about slow starts from both Peyton Watson last year, who never really found his footing there, despite, he was someone who I was really high on going into last season. I thought he was 6'8" with good tools, who could pass the ball a little bit, facilitate, play out of pick and rolls, and we just never saw him get going at UCLA. And yeah, if I was a Bruins fan, I'd be a little bit concerned that Amari Bailey, he made 1 field goal in the main event tournament.
Yeah. It was not a great start for them. Obviously, there's no Johnny Juzang on this team any longer, and it is very clear and obvious early. We'll keep our eyes on the Bruins and the rest of the Pac-12, which has frankly struggled against the SWAC and all sorts of stuff in the early going. Now, let's turn our attention to Maui, which is finally back in Maui. Praise Jesus for that, speaking of the pandemic. Now, Riley, we just want to kind of hit on this quickly, but out of the first round, I personally thought Arizona was the most impressive team. They've been doing it so far this season, but boy, did they do it again against Cincinnati in that first round game. As you watch these, what of the Maui teams are most impressing you so far?
Yeah, I'll echo that praise for Arizona. I think their front court has been tremendous. It's not missed a beat since Christian Coloco left. I think Umar Ballo, this dude couldn't get off the floor against Gonzaga 2 years ago. And he's averaging 18 points through the first 4 games, had I think 17 yesterday. And it's it seems like he's able to seal off his defender and get open in the post whenever he wants. And they have the guards to get them the ball. Kirk Kriisa is a special passer. I thought Pella Larson, he didn't have the biggest statistical game, but he's been excellent just making decisions. And there's one play, I think it was about 8 minutes left in the second half yesterday, where he had a rebound and literally threw a full court outlet pass to Cedric Henderson for a dunk, where I love Pella Larson's game. And I think he's someone who I kind of expected going into the season to not give you Ben Mathurin type numbers. I didn't think he'd get to 17 or 18 points per game, but I think I expected him to be the perimeter alpha, get 14, 15 a game, maybe 4 or 5 assists. And I mean, he hasn't quite been that yet, but Arizona hasn't really needed him to, because they've gotten good production from Ramey. They've gotten great production yesterday from Cedric Henderson, who, coming up from Campbell, looks like he's ready to go. And so that's a credit to what Tommy Lloyd's done and how good of a coach he is. But
absolutely, he's already shown that last year was no fluke in year one for Tommy Lloyd at Arizona. I mean, goodness, these Wildcats hit their first 12 shots of the second half in that game against Cincinnati. Great stuff watching Maui. We will see today, Wednesday, will be the championship game. And so all eyes are going to be on that. We want to move down from Maui, east and south, to the Bahamas. Check out what's going on at Atlantis, which kicks off today. And we are going to get you primed and ready for that in just a second. But first, I need to tell you about LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. It's incredibly easy to find a free job post, so why not give it a try? Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates you want to talk to and ultimately hire, so you can prioritize those who have the right skills and experience for your job. You want to finish the year strong, and the right hire can help you do just that. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free right now at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Again, that's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Okay, Mr. Riley Davis, let us get to the Battle for Atlantis. Again, it starts today, Wednesday, Thanksgiving Eve. That's not a thing, but we're going to use it. And the championship game will be on Friday. On one side of the bracket, we've got Kansas versus NC State and Dayton versus Wisconsin. On the other side, we've got Butler versus Tennessee and BYU versus USC. And we'll get to the games in a second, but here's, as I look at this field, it looks like it should be an incredible field, but we've only got 2 teams that are ranked currently out of the 8. And so I want to look at that big picture side of it for just a second here. What has caused us to get to a place where Dayton's dropped out of the rankings and Kansas and Tennessee's at 22nd are the only 2 ranked teams in this field?
Yeah, I mean, with Dayton, I think coming in, they don't have their point guard, for one, with Malachi Smith. I know he made his debut over the weekend and was pretty quiet, just played 20 minutes a game, had 5 points. And, I think this is not a slight on the A10 by any means. It's a great conference with a fantastic fan base. Fan bases across. Like, I never want to say anything bad because their fan bases are just rabid on Twitter, and I'm not trying to get them in my mentions. But I do find it interesting how it seems like every offseason we try to scramble to see like who the team out of the A10 is going to be.
That's a good word.
And it's like I said, it's a league I respect. There's always a ton of talented teams, great coaches. But I think it's only once since 2014 has an A10 team finished in the top 25 on KenPom, and that was Dayton in that transcendent 2020 year that got cut short.
Yeah.
So that's where I think that like the A10 it's a fine league, good league, but having a true top 25 team, it's not something that they always produce. There's a lot more teams who end up in that kind of 35 to 50 range. And maybe that's why we're seeing a little bit so far that Dayton hasn't quite been this juggernaut that we thought it would be.
Yeah, man. Well, as we get into looking at the actual games in this field, what I want to do, Riley, is identify some players that people can watch. I know some people have been all dialed in on football and are just this week maybe starting to turn some attention to college basketball. And so if I'm a fan who hasn't started really watching yet, who are some players that we should identify as like, these are some of the dudes to watch in this Battle for Atlantis field?
You want me to start with the big boys first or maybe go a little under the radar?
Let's go big boys first and then under the radar. Yeah.
All right, we can start with that Kansas and NC State matchup. With Kansas, DeJuan Harris is someone whose game I love. I mean, he's not going to get the headlines that someone like Jalen Wilson does, Jalen Wilson, Kansas's forward, coming in averaging around 18 points per game. And I mean, I think there's a chance he could enter the National Player of the Year conversation. He's going to put up points for them, but DeJuan Harris is just an all-star at doing the little things.
Yes.
He plays some of the best perimeter defense in the country. He might be the best like on-ball point of attack defender in the nation. And I think in particular, like NC State is a team who hasn't been as bad as I thought they would be. They've reminded me a little bit of some of those Kevin Keats teams that, tend to beat up on like really bad teams in the non-conference and then usually go like 500 in the ACC, sneak in the tournament as like a 8, 9, 10 seed or something. But I think Terquavion Smith, who's NC State's lead guard, NBA prospect, he still might get his like 20 against Kansas 25 because he's going to take like 25 shots.
That's right, he is.
But I think DeJuan Harris is going to be in his pocket. So that's someone who I'm looking forward to watching that matchup.
And yeah, DeJuan Harris is fantastic. Yeah, NC State is undefeated so far, although against all teams 168 or lower at Ken Palm.
Hey,
so
that's not as bad as in the past. Usually they beat up on like sub 250 teams. So
that's right. We're taking steps in the Kevin Keats area. You'll love to see it. Somebody that I'm really looking to see take a jump is Santiago Vescovi from Tennessee, right? Like this is a preseason SEC first team player, somebody that just has had a slow start to this year is part of why Tennessee lost to Colorado on a couple Sundays ago. And I just need that Tennessee backcourt to figure itself out. And I think it starts with Santiago Vescovi really doing things well. Another player that I'm going to go back to Kansas is, man, I love Grady Dick. Like this dude is one of my favorite freshmen in the entire country. I love like the swagger he's come out with this season. In some ways, it reminds me of a player they had drafted last year in Christian Brown. And like, I'm love to see the compliment that he can be to Jalen Wilson. I love how DeJuan Harris can be that facilitator that you're talking about to Wilson and Dick and all these guys that Kansas is rolling out there. And so that's somebody that I am looking forward to. Anybody else, maybe one other Mr. Riley Davis that you're keeping your eye on out of this field?
Yeah, well, first I just wanted to add with Grady, I would say NC State doesn't really have anybody who can attack him the way that Duke sort of targeted him in the Champions Classic, to where I think he'll be able to stay on the court this game. And I know this is going to sound like this is not even as like meant as hate towards NC State. It's just their perimeter defense has been awful, to where we could see some Grady Dick, some highlights, and he could be getting some buckets in this game. But two more names I'll throw out. Manny Bates for Butler. Speaking of the Wolfpack, NC State transfer, he has been incredible for Butler to start the year. It's not just been his defense. He's also been scoring and controlling the glass. And of course, I got to give a shout out to Chuck Harris, their point guard, who's just a bolt of lightning on the court. Simas Lukosius, I think I said that right, Lukosius, Butler wing. I like this Butler team a lot. I think it could be because one of my heat check cohorts, Lucas Harkins, our bracketologist, he's a Butler grad and has been pretty excited about this team going back to like the Thad Matta hire.
Yeah,
but
love getting him back. Yep.
Like looking at this field is clear that I think, it would be a shock if Tennessee and Kansas aren't in the final, but Butler is one of those teams who could crash the party a little bit.
Absolutely, they could do. And to what you just said, Riley, for me, give me the upsets in March, but I want chalk in November. I want to see Kansas and Tennessee in this championship game on Friday. As you look at these two sides of the bracket, would that be your prediction? Is Kansas coming out of their side, Tennessee coming out of their side?
Yeah, I think that's what I wrote about it for the Field of 68 Daily on Monday, and that was my pick. I rolled with Tennessee over Kansas and like picking them in a get right spot just after that Colorado loss. But you never know. Tennessee, they'll have some confounding losses in the non-con, and even Battle4Atlantis. It's almost like the anti-Maui in the sense that, you see so many offensive fireworks at Maui because you got those soft rims, you got high scoring games. But the Battle4Atlantis, it being played in like a dimly lit hotel ballroom.
Exactly.
You get some weird results of those games. Like, wasn't it Carolina who lost to Carolina lost to Butler in the Battle4Atlantis like 10 years ago, just got clapped by Butler
in a game they never should have even been competitive. Yeah.
Right.
But like, it's ballroom madness, man. That's what you get. So Arizona,
remember Arizona lost 3 games with DeAndre Ayton probably 5 years ago. Like Battle4Atlantis is weird. So yeah.
It's a weird tournament. For me, I have the exact same thing. I think this is a moment to bounce back for Tennessee. Kansas is a fantastic team, but honestly, I think Tennessee, despite their 22nd national ranking, is a top 10 team when they're right. And I think, as you alluded to a second ago, we're going to see a little bit of that roller coaster from them until the backcourt can really get things set in motion. For me, the best first round game, honestly, is Dayton, Wisconsin. I'm really excited for that one today. I know that's a bit off the radar for some people, but if you're looking for what actually could be a really highly competitive game, check in on that one. And honestly, BYU USC in the other game that we haven't talked about should be a highly competitive game as well.
I think
go ahead.
With BYU SC, man, I'm just like, I mean, it'll be competitive. I don't know. Those are just two teams who I just feel disappointed in early on. Like USC, Drew Peterson, someone who I'm a huge fan of and really thought he could carry this team. But I mean, haven't they already had a bad loss? I'm
USC?
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe so.
They might not have dropped they lost to Florida Gulf Coast.
Gulf Coast, wasn't it? Yeah.
Stomped by them. So I don't know. Maybe this could be a get right game for one of those teams, but they both got a lot to prove this week, I think, both BYU and SC.
They do. And BYU had a loss to San Diego State, which is totally understandable. But yeah, both these teams, I think, are looking for a good signature win. And they won't get it against each other, although it'll be a little bit notable. But if they do so, then maybe they could go and get a victory over Tennessee in the championship. Well, Battle4Atlantis is going to be a great field. Can't wait to watch these games starting today and again finishing on Friday with the championship. Riley and I want to just take a little trip around the country, see if some things that are already going on right now, some underwhelming players, some players that have kind of come out of the woodwork to surprise us. And we're going to get into talking about those in just a moment. But first, this episode is brought to you by BetOnline, which is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From football to basketball, soccer, and esports, they've got it all at BetOnline. Make sure you check out the lines for today's Maui Championship and, of course, the kickoff for the Battle4Atlantis that we just discussed. If you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. They're always the fastest and easiest betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about all the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Mr. Riley, here is where we're going to go. We've got several categories that we want to run around the nation and look at, starting with big picture. Who to you has been the most impressive team of the first 2 weeks? And let's base it on preseason projections.
Yeah, so like exceeding preseason expectations?
Exactly. So like, to me, Houston has been the best team in the nation so far, but we expected them to. Who's made a giant leap?
Yeah, I would say Texas. That's a team that I was sort of out on. I thought they'd be I thought they'd be in the 15 to 25 range.
Because that's what they've done lately in past years, right?
Yeah, right.
Keep going.
But we did a little Twitter space the weekend before the season, like one last question and answer promoting the almanac and everything. And Chris Beard dropped through, and maybe
did he really?
Let me just say I'm easily convinced by coaches. I fall for coach speak, so I was like wary of this. But Chris Beard won me over in this Twitter space talking about his team, and that made me think like, this might be the year for Texas. They might finally get it going. And I think that both Tyrese Hunter and Marcus Carr have been really good so far. Like Marcus Carr is making good passes. He's setting his teammates up. And I mean, Tyrese Hunter put on like one of the best performances of the year against Gonzaga. That dude could not miss. And whether it's hitting threes or mid-rangers, like I thought shooting was going to be a huge issue for Texas. And they might have figured it out. And they've been doing this still, not getting big production from Dylan Dessou yet, who I think is that X factor. If he can return to form, I know he was injured last year, like what we saw him at Vandy his freshman year. I mean, Texas is they're just outside my top 5 right now, but they're quickly ascending.
I think that's a great call. It's so good to see Marcus Carr doing what he should have done last year. And, Iowa State fans are just sick right now on the other side of things there. Another big test coming up for the Longhorns next Thursday. They will play Creighton. Love that new arena for Texas. That's good stuff. For me, it's somewhere between Virginia and Michigan State. We've already touched on Virginia a little bit on the show, so I'll go with Michigan State. Man, Tom Izzo just does it over and over and over again. That, to be honest with you, I thought the result against Gonzaga was just kind of the factor of what we talked about with Battle4Atlantis, just the unique environment, being on the aircraft carrier. It's like, all right, cool, whatever. But then for them to follow that up by beating Kentucky in the Champions Classic, it's like, oh man, Izzo might have something going on here. Now, we're going to have to wait and see on that. What happens when you get into the gauntlet of Big Ten play and all of those things. But I love what Michigan State has been doing. Love to see them jump from unranked straight on up to, like, I think they're 12th in this week's new rankings. What about the poor unfortunate souls that are on the flip side? Who has been the least impressive team of the first couple weeks relative to expectations?
Yeah, I'll go with the Sunshine State. Has just been a six-pack of mid between like Florida was a team who I was expecting to be in the conversation as a top 15 team. They've already suffered a questionable loss. It's slipping my head right now, but more notably, Florida State has been awful. And that's a team who I like all offseason. I was like, bounce back Knowles, like Leonard Hamilton still got it. They're not going to be injured again. And Florida State basically said, like, hold my beer, we're going to be super banged up again. And I don't mean to make light of that, but like it started with the injury to Jalen Gainey, ACL tear before the season. I know Naheem McLeod, he's back on the court, but he's been battling injuries. And, you know, with Hamilton, it's like for, gosh, the better part of a decade, we just got used to him having droves of like these alien-like bigs and wings coming on the floor, and they just don't have that. I mean, you can get some production out of Cameron Fletcher. Matthew Cleveland hasn't quite become the alpha that I thought he would be. And then this backcourt, the combo of Jalen Warley and Caleb Mills, it's not been good.
And the Baba Miller suspension on top of all the injuries,
yeah, I forgot to even mention that. Like, free Baba, he shouldn't be suspended, but
no, come on, NCAA.
Even in the middle of that, like Ham has been one of my favorite coaches to watch. I think he's just a stand-up dude and an incredible coach. But yeah, it's been rough for him, and I don't know. I wonder like how much longer is he hoping he can do this? Because even though he looks like he's 40, he's in his 70s.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thankfully the Seminoles finally got a victory. They beat Mercer. Louisville, however, still on the schneid after continuing to lose. I believe it was to Arkansas in their Maui opener. So, wow, just woof for the Cardinals. You hate to see it. That Florida loss you referenced, I believe, was to Florida Atlantic. We always talk about freshmen and freshmen we're watching out for. Who to you has been the most impressive freshman around the country so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think Keontae George is one of the obvious choices, who's been an absolute bucket to start the year.
That dude's got a baby face.
I thought Anthony Black was pretty good in that game against against Louisville. Yeah, I mean, but then again, he's basically playing like a Sun Belt team at that point, so I don't know how much stock you can put into that. So I'll actually rock with Kyle Filipowski, especially compared to my preseason expectations. Like about a month before the season, there were a lot of reports that he had looked overwhelmed at Duke's practice, but so far it's like, dude, who was watching these Duke practices? I was lied to that Filipowski was not ready. I think I covered the Duke and Bellarmine game earlier this week, and he looks so comfortable and confident out there. His shot's looking good, and even beyond his shooting, like he's so comfortable shot faking and getting to the basket afterwards on the drive, which being able to do that at 7 feet as a freshman, that's pretty impressive. So I'll give credit where it's due there to Filipowski.
Yes, absolutely. And especially because it's not that he's the same level as Zion was at, but he was in that same thing where it's like he was at best third billing to Derek Lively and Dariq Whitehead, similar to Zion with RJ Barrett and Cam Reddish. But he and I know there's injuries that are factoring into it this year, but he has been far and away the best for them. And if I remember correctly, is like 4 total rebounds away from having a double-double in each of his first 5 collegiate games. I mean, that's insane. And to the flip of that, if I'm talking about freshmen who have underwhelmed so far, and again, I know we're factoring injuries in, but Derek Lively's been back for a couple games now, and he ain't doing anything, right?
Yeah, with Lively, it's interesting because I think, again, at the Bellarmine game, Duke was playing him out of dribble handoffs, and he had a couple of nice passes, which I didn't realize he had that in his bag. And I think still this year, like from friends I've heard in the recruiting world, like Derek Lively's high ranking was more so based on his NBA projection. So I would guess, we're not going to see his best basketball at Duke. His best basketball will probably come 4 or 5 years down the line in the NBA. But yeah, to see his lack of shots so far has been pretty surprising, especially just what kind of lob threat he is, and Duke having two guys in Tyrese Proctor and Jeremy Roach, theoretically, who are sort of supposed to be those like pick and roll wizards to be able to find Lively for those easy looks.
Friends, it's been so great to be together today. Big thanks to Riley Davis for joining us for the first time here on Locked On College Basketball. Thanks for making our show your first listen of the day. For your next listen, we want to encourage you to check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. Biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and of course, the take of the day. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and anywhere else you get podcasts. Hope you enjoy all the MTEs, eat all the turkey, and go America, go score all the goals against England this weekend. For Riley Davis, I'm Isaac Schade. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Peace.